They're joining within like 2 minutes. They're joining. Good evening, and a very warm welcome to everyone who have logged in today. Voice of Healthcare, in association with Dozee, brings to you this very interesting and informative discussion around the subject of remote patient monitoring and how technology is enabling a better ecosystem for patient monitoring and patient welfare and well-being in general. The broad topic for today's discussion is remote patient monitoring beyond ICU, an imperative for 360-degree patient safety and care. Today's panel consists of our leading industry experts who will be sharing their opinions around it. To begin with the session, I'd now like to request Dr. Rathan Kelkar, who is the Mission Director at National Health Mission, Department of Health and Family Welfare, Government of Kerala, to share his keynote address for the panel. So I'd now request to have Dr. Rathan on the screens, please.
At the outset, let me congratulate VOH for coming out with the online discussion on a very important topic, that is the future of healthcare with a focus on remote patient monitoring. With the advent of technology in all the sectors, the health care industry or the health sector has not been any exception. Healthcare needs technology, and we've seen advances of technology into healthcare like never before in the last few decades. We cannot discount the fact that technology has really made inroads into healthcare delivery and the way in which it has helped to understand and monitor the patient better, how it has helped to identify the issues a little earlier on so that the people do not progress in their disease. And also, technology to a large extent has also improved the quality of healthcare delivery as well as improved the health of a particular individual. Now, looking at technology in healthcare, I see it in two perspectives. One on the preventive side of it, and second is on the curative side of it. Technology has played a very important role in both the verticals, and it has really brought about a drastic change in the way in which healthcare delivery is happening, not only in the private sector, but also in the public sector. Now, with the advent of technology, we've seen the way in which the disease is being diagnosed quite early. With the advent of big data, analysis of the data from various sources on various parameters is happening through the technological framework that we have put in place. The artificial intelligence which has been brought into the delivery of healthcare has also brought about a metamorphosis in the way of delivery of services. The IoT, the Internet of Things, has again brought about advances through which we've been able to have real-time data analysis, real-time monitoring of the patient, as well as interventions on real time so that the patient is benefited in a big way. Now, having said all of this, it looks like a very rosy picture where you have technology and you have the utility of technology which can straight away be used in the healthcare delivery. But let's take an example of the theme itself, the remote patient monitoring. The biggest problem in the remote patient monitoring, I would say, is, or rather, the biggest problem in any advancement of technology is not the technology itself. It is the people who are not yet ready to embrace technology. The people should embrace technology to make it useful for the society. And generally, what we've been seeing is we've always been, especially in the healthcare, we've always been a little behind. We are lagging behind in embracing technology, due to which the fruits of technology are not readily available. It comes a few years down the line. So the biggest challenge or a handicap is to embrace technology at the right time, so that we can make the best of technology for healthcare delivery, and for uh, improving the use of technology itself. Now, I was talking about the patient monitoring remotely. There are two settings here. One is where a patient is monitored at home, using the entire setup of remote patient monitoring, where you have new resources deployed at the home, a nurse, and various devices are tagged to the patient, and then the doctor monitors remotely, say from a hospital setup or a command center. So that is one setup where a heavy cost is incurred in managing of a particular patient in a private setup. So that is a bit of a costly affair. But when we look at management of patient remotely in a government setup, for example, or in a setup where you're trying to manage the patient remotely a little far away in a district or a sub-district setup, you can have in a government setup, I can think of having a taluk hospital or a community health center, which can have an ICU setup, where you have doctors and nurses and all that, but you don't have specialists to the desired extent at those levels, because you find it very hard to get the specialists. So in those setup, it is highly beneficial to have a remote patient monitoring, so that the cases are managed efficiently at the grassroots itself, without sending all the patients to higher centers of excellence, where the beds get occupied. There are a lack of beds. There is a heavy demand for beds in the medical colleges and higher centers. So the best way in which we can monitor or probably utilize technology for management of patients outside the ICU setup probably could be something like this, where we set up a dedicated ICU unit in a taluk hospital or a community health center. We have dedicated people there, but the expert advice and follow-ups and all that is being done from a command center of any particular higher center, which can be monitoring all the data which is coming from the various devices attached to the patient, and giving efficient treatment and also guidance. So this is definitely a possible activity, and most of the governments are also looking at doing on these lines, so that we embrace the remote patient monitoring, which we've seen very efficiently being handled during the COVID times, where the patients could not really come to a hospital setting of higher centers due to various restrictions. So we had to manage the patients remotely, and it was very very successful. May not be like an ICU setup, but yes, in terms of guidance and monitoring of patients remotely, it was very successful model. And now when you're looking at a patient being monitored outside ICU setup, but in similar kind of settings, I think that this kind of a model probably can be looked at very seriously by everyone, and the governments, I think, across the country are also very seriously looking at it. So now, to even think of those things, the embracing of that kind of a concept with the human mind, I think that is the most important thing. Changing of mindsets for a common objective and a common goal is what is very, very critical to begin with. Now, going on, as far as technological advances are concerned, the cost is also a very important factor when it comes to implementation of public health across the country. And the costs become very, very critical because there is always a limited resource in the hands of any particular body. And to that extent, the costs of setting up of these kind of institutions of excellence, where you monitor these patients remotely, also becomes very challenging, because the kind of devices involved, the costing of these devices is very, very critical. So the industry should look very closely at how to bring down the costs of all of these devices, so that it becomes very easy for implementation in a government setting. And now looking at these various systems, how they are all integrated into the whole sum is also very critical, because we are seeing the IT systems, the technology has legacy issues working across various software domains and technological verticals. and interactions with them is getting very difficult. Most of these softwares are all closed systems. The devices do not talk to each other. So we need to create a mechanism of open systems so that we have enough devices, enough manufacturers, which will, and enough advances in technology which will bring down the cost drastically, so that it becomes easier for implementation of a solution of this nature, not only in the private setting but also in the government setting, and including the private setting. When the costs are very high, ultimately it is transferred down to the patients, so who will have to bear the brunt of this costing. So I think a healthcare costing, which is important in terms of reduction of out-of-pocket expenses, is also a challenge I would see going forward when we are embracing technology in a big way. And looking at the way in which we've been setting up various systems embracing technology. Biggest challenge here again would also be capacity building amongst various stakeholders. It need not be only the patients who are at a disadvantage in understanding technology and getting attuned to it. Even the healthcare personnel who are delivering these care also need to be suitably trained and acquainted with the advances in technology, which is also very critical. So capacity building becomes very, very important in this entire process of embracing technology. Now, we've seen the benefits of technology for what I've been speaking now, in terms of improving quality of life, in terms of ease of access to healthcare, which is very important. The equitable distribution of healthcare is also possible if we are able to provide these kind of good interventions at the first point, or can we say the last mile of healthcare delivery, so that it becomes easier for everybody to access healthcare, and it becomes the universal healthcare coverage, what we keep speaking about, how the information technology can play a major role in that. I think that is one serious thought which we all need to look at ultimately. Having said, all of these challenges does exist in any kind of advancement in technology, but what we also need to remember is every challenge also gives us an amazing opportunity to take the benefits of the technology forward, and that will come only if we embrace technology earlier on without waiting too much, or rather causing too much of a delay, which will also reduce the impact of the advancement of technology. And to make the best of technology, I think we all need to ensure that the challenges that I mentioned in terms of costing is brought down drastically, because that is very, very important. And for that to happen, all the stakeholders, not only the hardware manufacturers, but also the software manufacturers, the healthcare personnel, the pharmacies who are producing these drugs, which are very, very important um, the management of patients, as well as the diagnostics, which is also a very critical aspect as far as out-of-pocket expenditure is concerned, because a huge amount goes in management of the patient on diagnostics as well as on the drugs. So to reduce out-of-pocket expenditure, I think these are some of the other important stakeholder partners who all need to come together for a particular cause, that is to bring down costs of healthcare, to embrace technology so that healthcare can be delivered to the people in a big way and a very efficient and appropriate way, with the least cost possible, which will bring benefits back to the people. Ultimately, once the benefits are brought to the people then contribute to those benefits back into the community, and then that's the way in which the entire country can see the benefits of the healthy life, impact of effective healthcare being seen across the country, and ultimately that is how the country is going to grow. So everybody is responsible um, for embracing technology, for reducing costs, for implementing in the best way possible, and also creating systems which will talk to each other, so that we will be able to use the technology to the biggest extent possible. And now healthcare is poised at a stage where there is going to be a huge jump in terms of various new devices which are coming into the market, the new interventions which are happening in terms of the robotic surgeries and other interventions in technology, which we are seeing not only in the devices but also in the pharmacies, the way in which vaccines are being created. We could see that during COVID time. So there is a lot happening. Technology plays a major role in all of this. So I hope that we as a team embrace technology earlier on so that we can make the best of it. And a discussion of this nature definitely gives us a lot of ideas, which helps us in policy formulation. And I hope that the deliberations which are going to happen in the VOH forum will be useful to all of us to learn from each other and take the best foot forward in the healthcare deliveries for the common man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kelkar. I believe it was truly, he shared his deep insights on the topic, and which would now lead us to our panel discussion. So, I'd now like to introduce our speakers for the panel. We have Miss Gracy Mathai with us. Ma'am is the CEO at Baby Memorial Hospital, Kerala. Welcome so much, ma'am. We have Dr. Kishan with us. Sir is COO at Meditrina Hospital, Kerala. Thank you so much, Dr. Kishan.
Thank you so much for
We also have Dr. Deepak P with us. Sir is Head Critical Care at KIMSHEALTH, Kerala. Welcome so much, Dr. Deepak. We have Dr. Sanjeev Singh with us. Sir is Chief Medical Superintendent at Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, Kochi. Welcome, Dr. Singh. I think Sir is on mute. We also have Dr. Anup Warrier with us. Sir is the Medical Director at Aster DM Healthcare, Kochi. Welcome so much, Dr. Warrior. I think Sir is on mute.
Yeah, good evening. I hope I'm audible. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. We also have Mr. Mudit Dandwate. He is the co-founder and CEO at Dozee. Welcome so much, Mudit.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Now moving on, before starting with the panel, I'd now like to request you to share your opening remarks on how connected health in every bed has become the necessity more than a choice. So over to you, Mudit, and then we'll start with the panel. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Khushbu, and really looking forward to the panel. But before that, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Kelkar, right, about what points he brought in, and he talked about how basically how to build a system in which we can have an equitable distribution of healthcare and access to everyone. I think that is the dream of healthcare always: access, availability, and affordability for everyone. And in that, right, one of the things which we have always seen across all the dimension, not just in healthcare, but even across the different industries, that when we had to do things at scale, technology is a big enabler from that perspective, if adopted well. Right? And one of the things and barriers which Dr. Kelkar also spoke about, one of the biggest one is actually embracing technology in early stages, so that the effects can be seen early, right? And healthcare is generally seen as an industry which is typically little lagging in terms of adoption of technology and so on. But I think a lot is changing, and that's what I wanted to share some things over there. In fact, Dr. Kelkar also spoke about a lot of benefits as well during the COVID time. But let me start with setting up some context, right? As in some trivia over here, right? We know in India we have about 20 lakh beds over there, and out of that, about 1,25,000 of them are ICU beds. The rest 18,75,000 beds that we have are manually monitored by nurses, going to the patient every 4 to 6 hours, doing a spot check, writing it down on a piece of paper on their sheet, then digitizing it in the EMR systems and the HI systems and so on. And eventually that converting into, sheets which doctors use during the rounds and so on. So 7 years back when we started our journey, and we saw that this was the state, we thought that, if we could do something to automate this one piece, which was taking a big bandwidth of nurses out there, about 20 to 30% of the time was going in this, if we could make healthcare monitoring super easy, right? And I'll come to it as well, that what we exactly had built. But we thought that if we are able to do this, what can be the impact? And of course, now that we have implemented this in more than 320 hospitals and more than 7,000 beds are being monitored using the technology, today we know that every 100 Dozee beds which are out there save about 144 lives annually. We are able to save about 2.7 crores of saving is we are able to implement by reducing the average length of stay inside ICUs. And also we are reducing the burden on the nursing staff by almost 80% by automating this entire patient monitoring piece and directly attaching it to the hospital HIS system. And Dr. Kelkar also spoke a lot about the interoperability part as well, how these systems talk to each other. So I think this is the impact that we were able to drive. Now, talking about why even there was a need for something like this. So manual monitoring, which is the state right now for most of the patient beds which are out there, we saw that manual monitoring has its own limitations. The deterioration of patients sometimes goes unnoticed inside the wards because only 2 to 3% of the times they are being monitored when nurses are actually monitoring them with the spot check. This leads to delayed intervention, and therefore in hospital adversities are not very uncommon, right? And in ward code blue events and so on do happen, right, even today as well, which are entirely avoidable. A large majority of them are avoidable, given that if we could sense these things early, and intervention can be given in early stages as well itself, right, using early warning systems and so on. And that's where we started our journey with. We created India's first contactless remote patient monitor and AI-based early warning system. So it's a thin sheet of sensor, a proprietary technology completely made in India that just goes under the mattress, under the thoracic region of the patient, and monitors the micro vibration produced in every heartbeat, respiration, cycles, and so on. And then using AI, we convert these micro vibrations into different biomarkers like heart rate, respiration, blood pressure, myocardial performance indices, and so on. And then the device is also extensible to connect to different kind of other devices as well, to extend the monitoring to oxygen saturation, temperature, ECG, rhythm monitoring, and so on as well, using different probes as well, right? So that's how we are able to kind of work through the entire length and breadth of patient monitoring per se, based on the criticality of the patient. And then once the patient monitoring becomes as easy that patient has to simply just lie down on the bed, and nurses on the click of a button can actually administer a patient, when healthcare becomes that seamless and easy. So where we were getting, one data point every 4 to 6 hours, we are now getting more than 200 to 300 data points every minute, right? And then using this trend-based information, we are able to triage patients much more effectively using the AI-based algorithms, using the AI-based early warning system, and then in time give notifications, and thereby, most important thing which we all talk about, improve the patient safety and save lives in the process, right? So that's what we developed, and right now we have implemented it in more than 320 hospitals across the country, both in public as well as in private settings. In public settings, we worked a lot during the COVID times as well. In fact, in IGGMC Nagpur, one of the early hospitals where we had implemented, one of the first hospitals where we had implemented this technology, we have achieved more than 800 successful ICU transfers and changes in therapy in time, where one nurse was managing more than 100 patients, right? So that was a kind of nurse to patient ratio skew, and still using technology by enabling the command centers, which Dr. Kelkar spoke about at length, by enabling command center model, hub and spoke models, and so on. We were able to even help that hospital deliver a very high grade care even in the toughest of time as well, right? And now they are using it for their post-operative patient, post-cardiac patients, and so on as well, right? And successfully have implemented that. Not just in the public settings, but even in the private settings as well. We had seen some industry-leading hospitals using this to deliver enhanced care to their patients, in burn wards, in chemotherapy wards, and VIP rooms where generally it is rooms are closed, so a nurse cannot enter the room all the while. So thereby, even it is crossing that. So technology is crossing that barrier of even all of these places, and all of this data is available remotely, and at the same time, it is connected to the hospital's HIS system as well, so that it can flow in very seamlessly to the existing ecosystem of what nurses and doctors are used to as well, right? Thereby changing by having the minimum change in terms of learning and so on, right? In fact, Dr. Kelkar also did speak about capacity building, and I think that is one of the major barriers as well, that anything new which has to become, we have to go through the entire training procedures and all that. While we of course do that in terms of remote patient monitoring and all that, but I think in terms of bringing the change, right, the easiest way of doing that is the change is minimal, right, to anyone, be it nurses, be it doctors, be it operators, be it even patients as well, right? So it has to be very seamless, and therefore we went with that entire approach of contactless patient monitoring. And in fact, why just hospitals as well? Now we are kind of launching one of the award-winning services at home as well, where now elderly people who are there can be monitored continuously, and then can be triaged in time as well, right? And again, using the same command center and hub and spoke model over there, we are implementing this now all across India as well. And that's where now today I am looking forward to this panel discussion, and where we have the veterans from the industry, Dr. Anup, Warrior, Mrs. Gracy, Mathai, Dr. Shankar, Dr. Deepak, and Dr. Sanjeev as well. So in that, I am looking forward to the discussion and learn what are the barriers, right? And the opportunities, more than barrier, what are the opportunities out there, given that we have reached an advent of a technology that we have today. Today, we can pack the most complicated technologies in a in a form factor that we all carry with us, like mobile phone. And our sensing technology has improved way beyond. We have talent which can actually enable most sophisticated IT development as well as device development in the country itself. So what is it that we can do now to take the patient safety and care to the next level altogether and catapult it ahead over there? So over to you, Khushbu, and let me know how we can now start the panel discussion as well. Is Khushbu there? I think great.
Hi, Mudit. Yeah, I was here earlier. I was just saying that maybe we can start with the panel discussion, the questions flow. We have every panelist. I'm just talking to Dr. Sanjeev. He might have logged out. So maybe once he comes on the screen, then we take his questions. We can start with the discussion.
Perfect. Sounds good. So thanks a lot for that, Khushbu. So we'll start with the discussion. I think I'm looking forward to the stellar panel and a very diverse panel, I would say. We have, we have doctors, likes of Dr. Deepak from critical care experts in that, Dr. Anup Warrier, with a physician who is focused a lot on infectious diseases and also looking at administration at Aster. Dr. Kishan, who is a doctor. He is business management. He has completed his business management from IIM Ahmedabad and has also worked with Indian Army as well, right? And has one accolades from the Chief of Army Staff as well. Mrs. Gracy Mathai, who is veteran in hospital administration. In fact, I was chatting with her in the back room that she has more experience than I have experience in breathing itself. And Dr. Sanjeev, right, who I think will be waiting for him, but we have heard about the big ambitious projects that he has launched very recently in Faridabad. So we'll start with the discussion with Dr. Anup Warrior. Sir, would like to start with this, and this is something which will take views and opinion from everyone, that do you think in the practice that, now all of you are into the practice for a good amount of time into this, you have seen how the industry itself is changing both in pre-COVID as well as in a post-COVID kind of a situation. What is the need or the gap which AI or technology can bridge by automating the patient monitoring piece, by making it more efficient? And then secondly, what are the barriers in that, right? So one is the opportunity, or what are the drivers for that, and what are the barriers for it? Would like to start with Dr. Anup, Warrier.
So, good evening, all. For some strange reason, all of us across this panel are colleagues and friends. Each of us know each other since many years, including Jay, Gracie Madam, of course, for a very long time, Deepak, my close friend. Okay, so coming to the opportunities, challenges in terms of technology in healthcare, and we are focusing on remote monitoring, and so that's what I also try to focus on rather than the general aspect of technology. Like what you were mentioning earlier, the vitals monitoring has been a very repetitive task, and something which is also a continuously required task. Okay, so it is repetitive, it has to be done on a continuous fashion through hours and days. Following this, the actions which has to be taken are also well described. You know, when there is a physiological abnormality, what kind of reaction has to happen. That's also, we know the response that has to happen to variation. So that is also well carved out in terms of what you should do. So an activity like that is most suitable for automation and AI, right? So because we know as humans, repetitive tasks are difficult for us. We know as humans, doing something on a continuous fashion for hours and hours is difficult for us. So this is absolutely a place where automation has a place, because it gets rid of the repeatability. It enables continuous process happening. It is also simple process, because in healthcare, many processes are too complicated for even the best technology to get in and get a grip. So this happens to be a simple process. So that is again one of the reasons why this vitals monitoring could be a suitable candidate for this. On the other side, we also have to remember that we always use this term enabler, technology as an enabler and technology as a tool. And that is important, because it's not the end-all solution, because we know it only triggers us to do something, it gives us information, but at the end of the day, there is a person at the other end who is able to interpret, take suitable decisions, and also implement those decisions on the ground. So the whoever thinks of technology, whoever thinks of implementing technology, has to think through this whole cycle. Okay, I'm going to put this in this technology here. This technology is going to give me this information, this input. Now, how do I manage this? Do I have the infra? Do I have the people capable? Even when you talk about remote ICUs, still you have somebody sitting at the other end who is qualified, looking into it. Still, you need people on the ground who has to take actions on what the feedback is given. So technology is a great tool. Something like this remote monitoring vitals, very much suited for this. The only thing is that we need to think it through to the end, where you have the organization or the team who thinks, they develop a infrastructure and a mechanism to actually act upon this information and implement it for the patient better. That's the opportunity that exists. So when you come to the challenge part, so what we need to understand is that healthcare is very sensitive. We handle lives, and so anything which comes in has to pass through a lot of scrutiny and validation. Right? It's unlike there where there is maybe a larger margin for error. Obviously, you are sending somebody to space, the margin of error is very less. The people lose lives there also, but I understand that. But in healthcare, it's on a continuous basis. I believe that the margin for error is very less. So any intervention, anything which comes into healthcare has to pass through that much more scrutiny and validation to reduce that margin, which is a challenge, because to prove something is safe is a difficult thing. It's a sustained goal to prove that something is safe over time. And we know that technology will fail. Humans fail, technology also fails. There is no technology which does not fail. So to manage this part is going to be a challenge. So how do we prove on the ground that yes, how do we put in safe mechanisms so that if there is a failure of technology, what is the backup? How do we address that failure? So this is going to be one of the challenges which we should come up with answers.
Absolutely. No, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. That's very helpful. Mrs. Gracie, would you like to share some light on this?
The same thing even I would like to add what Anup said. As such, today each one of us require some remote monitoring mechanism in our organization. I 100% agree with you, because what care and what equipment which is present in the ICU and what care we can give as soon as the patient is being shifted from the ICU to the floor is little difficult, and that ICU care we may not be able to give in the floor, because you require that much efficient nurses to monitor this patient. And why the cord blue, or why we need to shift the patient back to ICU? Because we could not monitor them in the ward. That's the main thing over there. Now, but again, when it comes to the technology, as someone have to watch this technology. I have used this technology during the COVID time, and few of my patients have appreciated also. I'll tell you how it is appreciated. A wearable watch have been given to them, and all those signals, what has been captured by the watch is being shown into my nursing station. And as soon as my nurse came to know, and then she went and inquired the patient, and the patient was very happy. Oh, how you come to know? I am happy. I don't have any problem. But then why you came? She said, no, I came to know that your pulse rates have reduced. That's why I come to know what is wrong in that. So that way it is there. But in another way, like what Dr. Anup has very clearly said, see, nowadays, you put a wearable machine on a patient and you come and relax, that will never happen. Patient want constant supervision of a qualified person. They don't totally believe on this wearable, and they'll tell you, okay, you put this wearable and you relax, or you reduce your nurse patient ratio. No, that we may not be able to do, because we require equally a suitable, equally a qualified, equally a challenging nurse or a doctor who will be monitoring this, and based on that monitoring, what action can be taken immediately. That's what we have to look into.
Absolutely. That's a very important point, that, reliance on technology doesn't mean, laxing on the human part of it. That is always very important. Dr. Jay, would you like to extend this?
Good evening, everyone. Great, excellent to listen. Excellent.
You are not audible. Jay, you
might
are not
have
audible.
to speak little
loudly,
louder, sir.
or to the mic.
Am I okay?
Yes, you're perfect. Yes.
Great insights listened from Dr. Kelkar, and rightly told by Mr. Mudit. This is an excellent theme to be discussed in the current scenario. Here we have few beds, 18 odd beds connected with the Dozee system in Meditrina hospital as of now, and we are benefited from that. I'll just take you through. But here, what the advantages Dr. Anup told and Dr. Gracy told are very right. They're getting instant report, but nurses say that during off hours, like during the hours when the patient is resting, no nurse would want to take, but they are instructed to take the vitals then. So discharging a patient during her sleep or resting time is one thing they are greatly benefited, because it is automated and coming. And another point is whether it is wearable or remote, there is a little inconvenience with a few wires for the temperature probe, and even the plate is below. There could be few wires which causes slight inconvenience. Yep. But generally, this is an excellent advantage for nurses to get the vitals automated with the critical alerts, and the analytics part of that can be easily accessed to take the previous days. And if this is integrated with HIS, this goes directly into the patient records, so that for legalities also to prove whatever you want, whether and to prove an action of a drug given, or any kind of events can be taken back, retrieved back. So definitely, this the advantages are there. And concerns. One more concern I would say is to get the confidence, rightly pointed out by Dr. Andu, the validation of the values. So another point is the delay if it is there. Recently, I think Honeywell company, the US-based company, has come with a real-time monitoring system. But I don't know how far the delays are reduced by the US giant Honeywell versus Dozee. But that is a point which could always discuss upon. In India, I think a couple of hospitals are introduced also. But doctors would always hear when I put this presentation to the doctors a couple of times, they first was skeptical, but when few doctors started advising this in the ward or in an HDU, with the advantages and the positive outcomes because of this, few success stories also which they could present, the acceptability has increased. And
Correct.
these are the general points.
Yeah. Great, sir. So thanks a lot for that. And one very important point that you actually brought in was actually nocturnal monitoring. Right, that is something which I have interacted with a lot of clinicians, intensivists. They are always little uncomfortable when it comes to data which is collected overnight, and what is the frequency being used, because generally even patients are also little sensitive at that time as well. So, Dr. Deepak, would you like to extend this further? That what are the opportunities for remote patient monitoring, and what are the bottlenecks, or what are the barriers to this?
Yeah, thank you, Mudit, and thank you, Dr. Anup, Gracie Madam, and Dr. Jay for your enlightening discussion. So, like in the intensive care, and when I shift a patient out to the HDU what I am looking for is that I should be sure that the readmission is very minimal, because readmission to ICU, whenever it is there, worsens the outcome of a patient. Also, it increases the cost, and also it results in poor patient experiences. So, whenever any intensive shift out a patient, they would like to have an assurance that there will be a continued monitoring. But as you know, like the nurses do most of the monitoring, and it is very difficult to get 1:1 nursing in the ward, and also that is not practically feasible. So what happens is continuous monitoring is not possible in the ward with when it is done by the nurses. And when you analyze a code blue scenario, and when you look back at the patient records, you can see many sequences which had resulted in the code blue, and which were either missed or which were not unattended, even though it was noticed. So this leads to a code blue, and the patient comes back to the ICU. So what I would expect from a remote patient monitoring is that there should be a continuous monitoring of the vitals, and there should be a alarm when the patient goes in for a critical situation, like we have the early warning score. So the technology should be able to provide the early warning score of the patient and give an alarm to the physician, so that appropriate measurement can be taken at the early stage. So this is what I expect from a remote patient monitoring. So the bottleneck is one of the bottleneck is actually like the main bottleneck is the inertia to change, and the inertia to change is there with everyone. So like one, as Dr. Anup said, all these technologies should be well validated. See,
Correct.
I did my medical schooling in the early 90s, and when I was posted as a house surgeon in the ICU, what we used to do is we had to monitor the respiratory rate, heart rate, saturation, and BP, that is a non-invasive BP, hourly and right. So
Correct.
what usually happens is we are so busy that we go for monitoring once in 4 hours, and we fill up the rest of the chart. So actually, the monitoring is happening once in 4 hours, and but we fill the blanks. So that is a practical reality. So now what happens is, now almost 30 years later, when I work in the ICU, you have a multi-parameter monitoring where you have the invasive
Correct.
arterial BP, you have the saturation, you have the end-tidal carbon dioxide, and you even have the beat-to-beat cardiac output of a patient, continuously monitored 24 hours day, for 24 hours round the clock in a day. And you know when the patient is deteriorating, like you can pick up the deterioration at an early stage. So the main bottleneck I see in these things is there is a lack of human interaction, human touch when this patient goes to the remote
Hmm.
monitoring things. Lack of human touch. That is, the patient may not be sure whether I am getting proper attention because they may not be much comfortable with the technology, technological
Being
thing being monitoring their vitals. Though, so they will be less confident. They will be more confident if a nurse comes to meet them at least once in a while, at least once in a day or so. So that is one bottleneck. And the second bottleneck is, as Dr. Anup already mentioned, the validation of the technology. That is very
correct.
important because, and also the validation in healthcare is difficult because we are dealing with human life, and the validation of technology in human
Correct.
or in healthcare is difficult. And these are the points I would like to raise here.
No, excellent, I think, point. I think the next question is very related. So before I come to that, would like to summarize everyone points over there. So Dr. Anup said that, what happens is that, these tasks tend to be very repetitive and continuous. And as humans, we, are not the best at that and can be automated for sure. However, what it should be done is that it should be sensitive, at the same time well validated. Gracie ma'am, extended this further about, how this should also be, around fail-safe mechanisms should be implemented. That what if the technology fails, then what? Then how do you, kind of hold it over there? Dr. Jay extended this further that about the advantages being nocturnal monitoring and so on in this. And Dr. Deepak talked about the need for early warning systems which are associated so that the code blues can be reduced. At the same time, bottlenecks being the inertia to change, and how do we still maintain high human touch point at the end of it, right? We just don't want to hand over a patient to technology, right? So how do we still maintain that piece as well? So I think excellent points over there. Related, I think I would like to take it ahead that early warning systems and non-ICU setups to reduce code blue events, right? So Dr. Deepak did, talk about that. So Dr. Deepak, would you like to talk about the significance of this, right? I know you had touched upon that subject, but can you extend this little bit further that, how in your practice you have seen that in places where early warning system has been there, let it be manually as well, but where you have seen a significant impact of that in the practice as well? So
Yeah, like the implementation of the early warning score in the hospital practice has helped to reduce the number of code blues. There is no doubt in that. But what happens is, like, most of the hospitals are very busy and we have very less manpower, and there is always a scarcity of manpower. In the ICU there will be 1:1 nursing and all, but when it goes to the ward, it may be 1:7 or 1:6. And so it is not humanly possible to closely monitor a patient who is at risk of deterioration. So in such cases, we definitely need a continuous monitoring system. And one thing is that. Second thing is that when there is a deterioration in the clinical condition, that should be picked up at an early stage. So now, as I said earlier, when you review the various code blues, what happens is there will be some events which the patient might have neglected, or if the
correct.
patient had communicated to the bystander might have neglected. And even if the bystander had gone to the nurse, because of her workload, either she might have neglected or she might not have gone to check it, or even if she had checked it, she might not have communicated it with the physician. So these sequence of events lead to code blue. Very rarely a patient, like except for a pulmonary embolism, which there can be a sudden code blue, even in ACS or even in a carbon dioxide narcosis or any or pneumothorax, any clinical condition, there will be some pre-monitoring signs. So the most important thing is to pick up the pre-monitoring site at an early stage and intervene so that these code blues can be avoided.
Excellent. Dr. Jay, would you like to share your experience with this on
Yeah.
early warning score being, helping to reduce code blue events?
Yes, since there is a critical warning system, and while there could be a miss during the wee hours, and the nurses, the attrition of the nurses is also a critical thing in this scenario, because of the no requirement of OET or IELTS to go abroad. Uh, the attrition has gone up, and very difficult to get experienced nurses these days. So the training nurses definitely will be there. There could be a miss happening from them, or during the night hours, definitely to there could be a miss from the monitoring. So live monitoring definitely has helped, especially the alerts happening, the live alerts happening. So I touched upon point of the delay. So in ICU setup, I don't think this is a possibility. In HDU, this could be, I think, a possibility. It depends on the delay of when the actual event happens and when the alert comes, because it comes after a processing from your central processing something, I
Correct.
believe. So
Yeah,
that is one thing here during the in the reduction of code blues. I would like to highlight.
excellent. Sounds good. So, Gracie ma'am, in your
Yes, I
practice?
would like to add 100% early warning signs monitoring on a manual basis have reduced more than 50% code blue in my organization.
Wow.
That's a
Wow.
very things, and if that is being, as you said, monitored on a remote basis, it will be highly appreciable, because with the manual even I can bring up to 50% less. It
50%.
means you can imagine if you have a remote monitoring system of early warning
Then
signs,
what?
which will give us an 100%, it will show miracle over there. And
Wow.
by not only reducing code blue, what has happened along with this early warning signs, we also have an RRT. Immediately an RRT, rapid response team, the call will go over there, and that immediately the person will be seen by those people, and whether it should be shifted to ICU or not to shift to ICU, what action should be taken. 100% it is beneficial. I 100% support on that.
Understood. Dr. Warrier?
Yeah. So just to reiterate what Dr. Deepak and others have told, yeah, there is obviously a lot of data out there which says that so-called sudden cardiac arrest preceded by changes in physiological variables much preceding that, maybe for hours together. So that definitely gives us an edge to detect complications earlier. Right now, most of us are doing the manual way, as Ms. Gracie Madam was mentioning. The thing is not just measuring; it is also that some point that Dr. Jay mentioned. The person who is collecting the data, he should be able to understand when the physiological variables go up and down, that this is a critical phase where I need to raise the RRT system. So for that, right now, what all of us doing is we have put some visual aids where on the hemodynamic monitoring charts or this vitals monitoring charts, they are color coded so that when these vitals go up and down, they go up to the range of yellow, red, and then so that there is some visual aid to the person who is at the bedside to understand something is wrong because these values are falling in the red. So maybe I should call for help. So that's where we are now. And as you mentioned, when we have this continuous monitoring system, one of the dangers of this is also that in some of these physiological parameters, when we set these values, heart rate below 40 and above 120 and all. So there are patients whom this actually becomes acceptable, or we know that this is going to be there and we are not going to take any action. Right. So we need to put in mechanisms for that also, where we understand, we select, yes, we review and find that yes, this patient has got abnormal variables. So this is fine, and we have a system for taking care of it without continuously giving off alarms.
Correct. Very important point. Yes. So, great point. Just to summarize, what everyone again spoke about. So Dr. Deepak spoke about, his experience of implementation of EWS in hospital and how it is, kind of impractical to implement this system in wards right away, because the nurse to patient ratio is slightly, is not slightly more than ICU. So there is the need of continuous vitals monitoring for getting the deterioration early. And he did speak about, how every kind of, every condition out there, barring few, do show early signs which can be caught in time, and the patients can be managed early. Right. Dr. Jay spoke about, how experienced nurses are here, so while we are relying on manual intervention, the training itself is a hassle. At the same time, the timing is also very important, for any kind of alert system out there. Gracie ma'am, gave us her, experience in terms of this, that, her manual intervention itself is reducing by 50%. Then we can only imagine what can happen if this is entirely automated, right, over there. And Dr. Warrier spoke about, how sudden cardiac arrest and so on can be assessed much earlier, and at the same time also stressing upon the configurability as well out there, right? Every patient is different, and the system should not be a blind system where we are, just creating some rules and it is beeping or buzzing and disturbing everyone out there. It should also be configurable at the same time to understand, based on the patient history and so on, we can configure the tools as well, right? So that's where the smartness of the systems are also important, so as to, maintain the sanctity inside the wards as well, and not to create panics for every smallest of the things as well. So I think that was very helpful from that perspective. I'd like to, take it a little bit ahead now that, now that we have such a diverse and experienced panel. What do you think, are the specific clinical use cases where you think continuous remote patient monitoring can be a huge value add? Dr. Deepak did speak about, as when patient is moving out from ICUs, he wanted that, this kind of system should be there. But any other, use cases, clinical protocols where you think continuous remote patient monitoring should be an important part of? So we'll start this time with Gracie. Gracie ma'am, would you like to shed some light on this, that which specific clinical conditions do you think, such systems are very much required for? And, as we move along the panel, we can keep on adding those conditions as well.
Now, see, when the patient is on certain drugs, and where we know that the effect of the drug can show either the pulse rate may increase or it may decrease, those particular time we may have to check the patient. So in the remote thing, like same like where tachycardia and tachypnea is being expected in certain cases, there also the remote monitoring is going to help us. 100% it will help us, like. And many of the patients, they don't want to, irrespective of the disease, they don't want to stay in the ICU due to various reasons. So the relative, they ask us, not only the relatives, even some patient also, they may say that, no, I would like to go out of the ICU because ICU psychosis or various other related problems may have with the patient. And that particular time, we may ship the patient little early from the ICU, but that monitoring need to be done. Now, I remember long back, not now, some 20 years back, even in Bombay, one of the hospital where I was working, there was a telemonitoring, and the telemonitoring and the monitors have been attached, or rather wearable things have attached to the patient, and the report is being seen in the ICU. So ICU, there is always nurses, so they can see, and the doctors and nurses are there. They can see. So the ward nurses, they need not look into that, only the ICU nurses, because we know that this patient is shifted from ICU. I'm talking about some 20 years back scenario. I don't know now what is there at that particular place. So those type of patients, they require frequent monitoring.
Got it. Dr. Jai?
Yeah. The question was regarding the continuous monitoring type of patients, right?
Yes, correct.
Basically, in HDU, the type of patients who are as a step down are the commonest patients who are put with the system. But here, some of the patients have shown, practically speaking, I'm telling, some of the patients have shown some reluctance for adapting such kind of. So they would say that the nurse, few cases have occurred that the nurse should come and take, I don't want this kind of a system, the new technology into. So this is something which we need a briefing by the competent nurses. And thanks to for the provision of a couple of engineers from your side, so that the implementation went off okay. But one point I wish to tell us here, the nurses, because of the definite help in not going physically and the quality time they get because of the physical monitoring is escaped, avoided. They have a bit of quality time to go to the patient, have a talk, which is less happening these days. So that mechanical kind of this thing is less for them. So it was easy from the nurses' side because of easiness. They could adapt faster into the system with a minimal amount of training. But doctors took a lot of time to for the validation point which we earlier discussed, and also because of the slight resistance to change. So few doctors only could change.
Understood. Dr. Deepak, what kind of patients you would like while you are moving them outside ICU, then you would like them that they should be on continuous monitoring? Dr. Deepak, I think you are on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, actually the post ICU monitoring is very important, because whatever good work we have done in the ICU is lost if the post ICU monitoring is not optimal. And nowadays, I think many of the hospital has got the electronic medical records and all, and we are entering the vitals, drugs and all into that. I think from a predictive analysis, we should be able to identify patients at risk of deteriorating. And this remote monitoring should be offered to such sort of patients. And in places where there is no EMR, I think we can rely on other critical illness scorings like the SOFA score and all, so that when the admission SOFA score in the ICU is above a certain level, or the Apache score, which is another scoring for the critically ill patients, when it is above a certain level, then we should have these patients on a remote monitoring even out of the ICU. The one advantage with this is that we will be able to shift the patient at an early stage from the ICU, which reduces the length of stay of patients in the ICU, and which is operationally also, which will be a great advantage with a limited number of ICU beds.
Excellent. Yeah, makes total sense. Dr. Warrier, I'll come to you now. Right? Would you like to add what kind of patients you would like to be on continuous monitoring even beyond ICU?
Yeah, so there is actually some kind of a data out there also for this, and we have all spoken about early warning scores and return to ICU aspects, etc., which is very well established. We know that for a fact because we have used manual systems and we see the impact of those manual systems already. So other than that, there's data out there to take this monitoring out into their homes. So there are two different settings. One setting is an extension of what Mr. Mathai was mentioning about people not being required to be in a hospital just for monitoring purpose, and they can be taken care. This monitoring aspect can be done at home itself, and that forms your post-operative patients, or even what the subset which Dr. Deepak was mentioning, who are shifted into the wards and they have a longer stay in the hospital. So that group can be managed even with remote monitoring at home. There is also data out there to suggest that at least two subgroups, the patients who are discharged after cardiac failure, were discharged with the diagnosis of cardiac failure, and those who have got discharged with the diagnosis of acute COPD or recurrent episodes of COPD, etc., that they have published to show that their return to the hospitalization visits and etc., are also modified or improved with the ability to monitor them and advise recommendations, change their medications while getting data while they are still at home. Okay. Obviously, some place where this has been explored now is emergency transport systems where people are transported either from hospital to another hospital or from their home or hospital. So that kind of systems where while they are transported for hours, we know that somebody sitting inside an ambulance will not be able to focus continuously on a monitor and all. So that is also one area that is being explored. So these are some additional areas where this is remote monitoring is possible. And finally, just to this one point also is that even when you say an ICU, and when you say ICU monitoring, ICU has got a continuous data capturing system, as Dr. Deepak was mentioning. Yes, we have a system to capture. But even though we would like to believe that there is continuous monitoring, it is not so. Okay, so because it is humanly impossible, and we know about alarm fatigues. So it is, while there is a continuous data capturing mechanism in ICU, whether it is always translating into data monitoring, that itself, that's a questionable thing. So there is an opportunity also there where if you are able to figure out how this technology can convert this constant data capturing into constant data monitoring.
Excellent point over there, sir. I think would like to summarize, and in fact, Dr. Warrier has, kind of also, talked about even beyond wards also, right? In fact, that was kind of my next question, but that makes a great continuity over there in that. So just summarizing, the points from everyone again. So Gracie ma'am spoke about, how patients on certain drugs which can cause trachapnea, tachycardia, apnea, and so on, need to be on this. Then patients, irrespective of disease, who are, falling towards ICU psychosis and so on, right? Who, can be monitored outside ICU, should be on this. Dr. Jay spoke about how HDU can be the place where it can be done. But at the same time, he also did speak about the point that, that at how, few of the patients, are also averse to new technologies or new changes as well. And that's where kind of training or briefing by the nurses, by the staff also kind of helps out over there, which is also very critical. Dr. Deepak spoke about the post ICU monitoring, given that all the good work that happens inside ICU can go for a waste if it is not managed properly outside ICU as well. And how some of these scoring mechanisms like QSOFA can be determinant of who should be on monitoring beyond ICU as well. The clear advantages of this can be the early shifting which can be done. Of course, it reduces the ICU psychosis, as Gracie ma'am said. At the same time, operationally as well as economically, it lightens up a lot of things for the patients as well, right? And can lead to faster recovery if basically something like this can be done. Dr. Warrior, then also stressed upon, why just limit ourselves to, thinking towards wards, but how about even home monitoring as well, right? In terms of some post-operative patients, chronic patients who are at high risk of readmissions as well can be monitored and managed at the home as well. And then even in the emergency transport systems as well, so that we can, have this entire continuum of care out there. As well as ICU, how the continuous data capturing systems can be converted into data monitoring systems, maybe using likes of AI and so on to, kind of pick up the trends as the patient has been changing over time as well. Brings me to the next question. Since Dr. Warrior, you were actually speaking about it, so we'll start from you on this as well. That the home monitoring piece, right? So we have a big population now. You did speak about some of the use cases, but even geriatrics as well, for that matter, right? People, old age, people who are at high risk, the population has been increasing very rapidly, and in fact, we see a lot of them also living alone now, right, away from their kids and so on. What do you think is the advent of home monitoring per se over this, especially for elderly population and for people with chronic conditions, as you were speaking about? And in this, we are actually talking about not a short-term monitoring for 3 days, 4 days, probably in a post-discharge kind of a way, but say a prolonged monitoring for months, right? If basically we have systems which are put into their beds or put into their wheel chairs and so on. If they whenever they are occupying it, they are being monitored, and if there are escalations, if the condition is deteriorating, immediately it gets alerted to the command center, which escalates it to their consulting doctors, right? That based on how the conditions are changing. So how do you think that is this the time for a system like this, or you think we are thinking too early about such systems out there? So Dr. Anu.
So this is probably something which we have to put some thought into, because as I was mentioning in my opening remarks, the validation is not just about the performance of the technology. That is one part of validation where the technology does actually what it claims to do. But it is also about finding value in the technology, meaning, okay, it does do what it claims to do, but from that activity, does the patient, the stakeholder, get some value? Now, to prove that is in this scenario, in the code blue scenario and early warning score, it is very easy to demonstrate and show value. But when you go into a much larger space like this, the home monitoring systems, and also when you're looking at a very generalized population like elderly, then our ability to show value for the intervention and the system which we put into to manage this, the whole process of collecting, how you respond, etc., etc. So there we have to put some thought. How do you prove that in this general population, when you put this much effort into this system where you are able to get information, you have put in systems to identify the variations in information, you have invested in people who respond to that intervention, etc. And over this, how will you show value? So I think this is something which we need to think through. Whether, as the reason why I mentioned cardiac failure and COPD is there, this is because it's there in international literature, where you prioritize people and try to find out in this general population who would actually get value from being observed over time and for how long that time. So if you are able to prioritize, have a subgroup, then it will be easy for us to show value, and it would make sense both to the patient and to the healthcare provider.
Correct. Excellent point, sir. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Dr. Jay, the question, let me, reiterate on that one. That basically we have been so far talking about, ICUs, beyond ICUs in wards. But now, we are talking about at home, right? So what category of patient, and Dr. Warrier also spoke about, may not be valuable for each and every, old age person and so on. So how do you divide them into subgroups and the value out there of it? But a big part is also that this population is increasing. This is also an important one which has to be taken care of. So how do we utilize technology to then enhance the catchment area of the way we are delivering healthcare as well? So yeah, Dr. Chen.
Ms. Mudit, I totally agree. Dr. Anup's point of the patient should be categorized correctly and the value should be there for them to adopt such a remote monitoring system from home. I was just wondering how a patient's probably BP, the vitals, BP, pulse, respiration, and temperature, along with the oxygen saturation, plus maybe cardiac activity like the ECG also probably. So these parameters, when you have it at a remote place, alerted by a third person to the consulting doctor, I wonder how would this patient reach, who actions, who bring the patient to. So if we have a mechanism to retrieve the patient, and if there is an alert to have a consultation and to provide to a hospital, we can be, from the business point of perspective, we can be a patient provider also to a hospital by getting such alerts. Another is another point. Why don't we have a camera also, so that these days the patient activities can also be monitored. But the point against I feel is
privacy.
Who will leave the aged parents, or even if the children are abroad and nobody is there, we will arrange a nurse or someone to take care of them. Not, I
Right.
don't think, I'm quite skeptical about leaving the patients to remote system idle alone.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Dr. Gracie, Gracie ma'am, would you like to speak on this?
I would like to add whatever Dr. Jay have said and Dr. Anup also have mentioned over here. See, who is going to monitor? What will be their knowledge? What will be their
Correct.
experience when they monitor this? If there is any problem with the machine, are they in a position to do the troubleshooting? That's one another important thing. I know that there are various hospitals, they have an additional wing of home
Correct.
care
Home
and
monitoring. Correct.
home monitoring and home care for routine patient as well as for critical patient. That's also
Correct.
is there. Now, in that case, what has happened? Whenever the patient become critical, and naturally the patient may be shifted to that particular hospital, or they may interact with the respective doctor, and they'll do the later part. But in emergency, how you handle that particular situation? Because a
Correct.
hospital setup, all these particular type of patient can go land into emergency at any time, and we have every facilities available. Now, whereas in the
Correct.
home, you don't have those
There's
facilities
none.
available.
Correct.
So that will become a problem. Now, we have an app in our Baby Memorial Hospital. We have developed an app, and then we tell all our discharge patient to download this app into their mobile. And we don't give, we don't give that critical home care. Only routine home care we give, but not with the critical patient. But only what we tell them that all our discharge patient, if they download this app, and in this app there is one provision that they have to put their address. So if they press a button,
Emergency.
if in emergency, immediately within a second we will come to know, and we
Correct.
know the location also, and our doctors will go over there and bring the patient to the hospital. See the patient over there, and if it is essential to bring the patient to the hospital with the permission of the relative, that also is being done. So that way we can do.
Understood. No, excellent, ma'am, and great use of technology over there. So would like to congratulate on that, right? So these small things, do make a big difference. Dr. Deepak, you spoke about how you would be comfortable if the patient who is moving outside ICU would like them to be monitored. How about when they are going home, right? So not just from a monitoring perspective, right? So how do you want the patient to be managed? And as Gracie ma'am said that, the technologies might be different. It can be as simple as an app as well, which can have a SOS button. But what are, different things in which you would like the patient to be managed at home?
Yeah, in this, I would start by telling an incident with my friend. Like
Sure.
he's a software engineer, and he had an Apple Watch. So
Oh,
one day he called me and said that it's showing some alarm. So he was not sure whether it is an artifact or whether the watch is defective and all. So when I observed, it was giving some recurrent atrial fibrillation alarm. So I asked him to get a cardiologist opinion. So he went there. He did a TMT, which was positive for an inducible ischemia, and he got his
oh,
angioplasty done also. So
correct.
this has actually saved his life. So I think this remote monitoring is going to be the future of healthcare in the coming years, because if the Apple Watch, even though it is not providing a medical grade ECG, if the Apple Watch can pick up such a thing and can save a life, it's a very important thing. Like even one life saved, especially in the productive
Correct.
stage, it's a very important thing. So I am a great proponent of the home monitoring of vitals. But as Dr. Jay said, it's not just the monitoring alone. There should be an action based on the monitoring parameters. So the support at home is equally important. So that it should supplement the monitoring. So I think both are like the monitoring is essential, and also the interpretation of the data received from monitoring. And for elderly people and all, it will be very difficult to go to
Correct.
hospital frequently. So there should be some support at home. Another option is like in the in US and all, the tele ICU is very rampant. Maybe we can think of something like telehealth monitoring, where the data from at-risk patients are monitored by a nurse or a healthcare worker, and anything and alarming values are sent across to a physician, and then can be managed appropriately.
Correct. Excellent, sir. So I think no, that anecdote was also very helpful in terms of how remote patient monitoring can actually be very useful in saving lives as well. I think we are pretty much in the end stages over here. So, Khushbu, do we have any questions from the audience which you would like to, throw it to the panel over there?
Yeah, hi Mudit. And we do have a couple of questions. I don't know if the panelists or you would like to answer it. So, the first question is generally, patients in the elderly age group are not that tech savvy. So, how can we simplify this technology for the people for the monitoring required after ICU care? That is one question. And the other question is there are other symptoms to look for apart from vitals. So, how solutions like these can enable that? So these are the couple of questions which I feel that are there. There is one other question from Mr. Joy. He says, what major markers you prefer for DVT and PE?
Right. So I think we can start with the clinical question, right? And maybe Dr. Deepak can take the question, right? So third question we can, Dr. Deepak, if you can take that.
Yeah, for the DVT and pulmonary embolism, there is a scoring system called the modified well scoring and all, depending on how much risk the patient carries. Like in the immediate post surgical period, the patient carries a high risk. So there is a scoring system called the well scoring system, and according to that, we can identify at-risk patients who are prone to develop this DVT and pulmonary embolism. And invariably, now the protocols advises Clexane prophylaxis for them. So when they are moved to ward, it would be good to have a monitoring so that any DVT or any pulmonary embolism can be picked up at an early stage.
Great. So thanks a lot for that. I think that answers the question very well. I'd like to maybe take the first question, given that it was around technology. Elderly people, yes, they are not very tech savvy. So therefore, and we can't expect them to change, right? For the sake of monitoring. At the end of it, monitoring, not something which is required, as in, of course, it is for them, but, it has to adopt to them rather than having them to adopt it. The way we have approached for that is that if we could, and that is where the entire concept of Dozee comes from, if we could create a system which can be entirely contactless, you just install that under the mattress, under the bed of the patient, of the subject, be it hospital or be it home, be it at home, and all that they literally have to do is just go and sleep, right? And even if they're doing that, you are getting the basic parameters like heart rate, respiration, blood pressure, sleep parameters, heart rate variability, cardiac markers, and so on, without even touching the persons, without even touching the subject over there. And that is how I think, the technology has to be, that, it doesn't change the lifestyle or user behavior at all. And only then it can be used for a prolonged time over there. So I think that, I hope that answers that particular question. Another question is that there are other symptoms to look for apart from vitals? How solutions like this will enable these, right? So Dr. Warrier, would you like to take this question? So vitals is, yes, one part of the story, but there are, of course, more things which one has to look at. So how, these solutions help? Yeah.
I think this is also a more technology focused question rather than
Let me
clinical.
know, I
But
can
sorry,
answer that, but I would love to hear your take as well.
So what
Yes,
I
because what has
know,
happened, patients are with various lines and all those things. So managing those lines, how you will do? That's one of the important questions. So you can answer that.
Great. So one thing which I know other than the vitals, which we have a potential to monitor and which we have a mechanism to monitor, is the fall risk actually. So there are the devices which help and support monitoring of fall risks. So that is something beyond the vitals. The other aspects where you need a visual assessment at all are difficult. As Jay also mentioned, you are also brought in this where you have a visual assessment. The privacy is a very important aspect where that cannot be done. So the only thing outside the monitoring of the vitals and the other parameters which you have, which I can think of, which is there in the market, which is looked at, is fall risk.
Correct. Right. So, just extending that thought a bit, yes, of course, in elderly, especially fall risk is one of the biggest parameter, right? And also the risk factor as well, in terms of injury as well as for adverse events as well. At the same time, we are also seeing now more and more collaborative approaches towards not just the vitals, but going beyond that as well, likes of, glucometers and, which are much more specific from that perspective. So diabetic patient glucometers being that integrated part of the system as well. From activity perspective as well, I think I was talking to a few cardiologists over there as well, cardiac surgeons. In fact, few of the parameters for them that whether the patient has recovered fully or not is that whether they have achieved that activity level, they have, a 5-minute test or something like that, in that particular time, are they able to walk certain distance or not, right? That means that whether they are come back to normal, gait-based parameters, right, in terms of how they are walking. If that is something which is, changing over time, it might mean, indicators towards, Parkinson's or deterioration over there as well. So there are a lot of markers which can be looked at. And technology can, of course, be, evolved towards looking at more of these as we go along. I think the entire magic lies in that, and how, I would like to reiterate a little bit of what Dr. Kelkar also spoke about, how these different systems speak to each other, how they are communicating with each other, and one common holistic picture is presented to the clinicians, so that, they can make the most of it in, bringing this entire continuum of care that we are talking about, maybe from ICU to home, ambulances, whatever, right? At the end of it, it is same patient who is going through. What if everything is communicating to each other and everything is, well recorded and well maintained as well, right? We could really create a system which can, transform the industry in that way. So on that, I think it brings me to the end of this. We are on our closing minutes out there. So any
Can I
closing
ask a
remarks?
question, Mudit? Mudit,
Yes,
can I
sir.
ask a small? So
Absolutely.
this thing is that my question is when so many technology developers, newer technologies coming up, but the input from the healthcare professionals into this is minimal. So I see many companies, many people coming in with technologies with very minimal input from healthcare professionals, and they actually do not understand the perspective and what the healthcare provider wants out of it. A simple thing like the vitals monitoring, the display is so important because we are used to seeing the vitals in a
In a
certain way
particular
and
way.
to access and take action on a certain way. And if the user interface, the output display, etc., is not tuned to how we are trained for decades of how we are doing manually into this thing, it becomes very difficult for us to adapt. So, since the adaptation of technology into healthcare is a challenge, Dr. Kelkar also was mentioning, and one of the major reasons for this difficulty in adaptation is because the technology developers are not really coming up with things which facilitate or how we are used to doing things.
Absolutely, sir. No, that is absolutely the point. At times you have seen many a times, right? Development happens in silos. It is, not keeping the end user in the loop. The biggest mistake which can happen does happen very often. And in fact, therefore, I think, forums like these become very important, in which, we are talking all through very transparently about, what is the system that we want to build. At the end of it, what I could learn from the entire session was that, see, all of us agree to one point that, continuous remote patient vitals monitoring has its importance, has its role to play, and big role to play for that matter. but there are, of course, some barriers which are there, including as minimal as you highlighted, how the user interface itself can be very minimal and something, which requires least amount of learning behavior from the end user as well. So any end comments from all of you? Quick ones. I think we have, here on our last minute over there. So Dr. Warrier, I think you have, we'll start with you.
So I would like to summarize on this, saying that it is not just enough that we focus just on the technology. And when, as I was reiterating, technology is a tool. So when we are using a tool, let us also try to put in the system around it on how we are going to use it. So plan it very holistically, where this technology will fit in with your scheme of things, and we are able to actually derive value out of it. So that's very, very important. That would be my the parting remark.
Absolutely. Gracie ma'am, I think we are approaching Patient Safety Week now very soon, right? So would you like to speak? And we had been,
Yes,
talking about technology.
Yes. We welcome technology. There is no doubt, but that technology must suit to the requirement of the individual person, because one technology which is suitable to one may not suit to others. So it should suit to the requirement of the individual patient in order to see the safety.
It should be adaptive as well.
Yes.
So, Dr. Jay, closing remarks.
Definite welcome from whether it is a connected patients, we can convert a ward to a kind of a HDU setup. So definite welcome for wearables, whichever technology introduced into. Definite reduction in code blues and conveniences to nurses in their workload, reduction of workload. One important thing which Dr. Anup just mentioned, I believe, is the pricing should be kept low, much lower than ICU rate.
Correct.
That would benefit the patient side also.
Absolutely. No, pricing is a big enabler. You are very right about that. Dr. Deepak, any closing remarks?
Yeah, from the clinical perspective as well as the operational perspective, remote monitoring is very essential, and I think it is going to come in a big way. But it should be user friendly, and the technology should be well validated.
Great. I think that summarizes today's discussion very well. So thanks a lot for the entire session. Khushbu, over to you.
Thank you so much again. Thank you, Mudit, for leading this discussion for us. And thank you to all the panelists. Just like to add that Dr. Sanjeev from Amrita Hospitals, who was supposed to join, he joined for a first bit of it, but then he was unable to join because of some medical emergency. That's what I just got to know. So anyways, thank you so much for this session, and we look forward to such more interesting sessions. Thanks again. We close the session.
Thank you. Thank you, each one of you.
And
thank you.
Actually, I could see all my friends.
How are you, Gracie ma'am?
Yeah, Anup and all. That's since long I was, watching to see them.